playing this song?
Captain Marvel from that Friday.
How many people went to see Captain Marvel? All right. Initial thoughts? I haven't seen it yet.
Honestly, when I saw the reviews, well, I mean, I'm probably using Rotten Tomatoes wrong, but like it got like an 81, 82 on Rotten Tomatoes. And I was like, oh my goodness, it's just gonna be like Ant-Man and the Wasp. It's just like I could go the whole movie without watching it, just watch the last scene, like after the movie, and be totally fine. But like the movie started a little bit slow. I was like, oh, it's not gonna be really good. But like as it went on, it was like, okay, well, this is actually really good. The girl's really, really smart and funny. Like she's not like Black Widow. Doesn't say very many words. She's pretty cool. Like it's cool.
Okay. Well, there's rumor Black Widow's getting a new movie. Getting a standalone movie.
I don't know.
With Emma Watson possibly sharing the kind of movie with her.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts?
I saw the reviews too, and I don't want to make reviews. I was like, maybe I should wait until it comes out.
It was really good.
So they, opening weekend blew away a lot of what you saw the negative review category. Actually, it beat Black Panther's record for opening weekend. And just for reference, it is the second. It's the second opening weekend for a superhero movie behind Avengers Infinity War. Avengers Infinity War, however, is far and above opening weekends of other movies. So if you were to look at the number disparity between Captain Marvel and Avengers Infinity War, it looks very, very large. However, Avengers Infinity War was, and I imagine Avengers Endgame will probably be Infinity War's opening weekend. So, and another really interesting thing, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to share this or not, with all the negative comments. Knowing what we know now about bots, could some of those be bots? Because I've read rumors that people were using bots to have unpopular comments on it, or unpopular reviews of the movie and things like that. But there's one thing in particular that I think is really interesting. We'll just talk about it really, really quickly. Is I can't remember who wrote it, but there's a project, a paper someone wrote in their doctoral work that was looking at the negative feedback or negative reviews surrounding Episode 8 of Star Wars. Because you remember, like that one is, it received a ton of negative reviews, and people actually even calling for it to be removed from canon, things like that. This person had the technology, had the access to be able to trace where those comments came from. And I originally just read the story thinking, oh, this is kind of cool, and you did a research paper on Star Wars, good for you, to figure out how to include it in there. But his research actually found that a good portion of those negative comments, the majority of those comments, were bots. And they were not from within the United States that those bots were originating. And so then he made the connection in the discussion that, you know, if you are a foreign agency trying to sow discord, you're not only going to target things like a country's election or things like that, you're going to target other popular culture mediums. And so this story I went into about the paper reading, or I went into reading about it thinking, like, oh, this is cool, you did a Star Wars project, good for you. I walked out of it thinking, whoa, this is an amazing takeaway that either this person or the reviewers or whatever of the article made this kind of connection. So good on them. It's just very interesting. kind of, you know, leading up to the movie seemed to get a lot of negative backlash. Even some celebrities coming out and saying that, you know, Marvel didn't appreciate male viewers or consumers and things like that. Really negative and really ridiculous things being said about what I hear is a very great movie.
Especially like, what people think the woman on the upper edge, it's like conservatives are saying a lot of stuff that is just, it's like, oh, why do they have a woman as the main character? Why do they have a woman? It's like, oh, what is this, like, feminism, blah, 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 like, all this nonsense. It's just a really like,
And see, if people would just go into movies thinking, I'm just going to see if I enjoy it. I'm not going to try to rip apart all of the statements made. I'm not going to try to rip apart, is there something that this represents over that it shouldn't represent or should represent, or things like that. I think people would enjoy just entertainment more. You think? If we entertainment, that includes sport, definitely says something about our society. Okay? Entertainment and sport is a mirror to society. From a consumer perspective, however, I think it's just enjoy it more if you just allowed yourself to enjoy it. Any other comments over Captain Marvel? Anyone planning to see it soon? Okay. All right, so as you see it, let me know your thoughts. A few things to begin. Garrett. Here is your prize or your book.
thank you.
You're welcome. So, a few other things one thing I want to point out at the beginning is, did everyone have a good spring break? Okay. Anyone go anywhere? New Orleans, okay. Where did you go?
Oh, a cruise.
Cruise, okay. Where was the cruise?
I stopped at like 4 different ports. I think it was Belize, Honduras, Cozumel.
Okay. Anyone else?
Gulf
Where?
Shores.
Gulf Shores. Gulf Shores.
One home to Chicago.
Chicago. So you went to where it was cold.
Biggest mistake.
We went to Lincoln, Nebraska. That's where my that's where my wife's family lives. And it was, I think while we were there, they had snowed 4 or 5 or 5 or 6 inches. So we definitely went from where it was a little bit warmer to, it got below 0 a few times while we were up there. So this winter is no joke for people going through it in the Midwest. One reason we were there to visit family, but another reason we were there is I did speak at the Center for Great Plains, which is Great Plains Studies at the University of Nebraska. And I showed this to you to kind of make the point that one reason we have these classes is so you could see research, or you could see your instructors in a different light, right? So you're definitely seeing me in a different light, research or talking about Disney and being a fan of Disney. However, as my research evolves, Disney has become more part of that. Because I research, I don't know if I've told you, I research rivalry. And I use the sports setting and basically look at why Group A feels they are different and in many ways better than Group B. And you take that within the sport context, you take it outside of the sport context, and we're talking about things like politics, race relations, anything where there is one group that is comparing themselves to another group. So I did speak this last Wednesday at the Center for Great Plains Studies. They Facebook Live it. And it was talk about the research that we've done, what we're doing moving forward, especially talking about a project we're working on, that we continue to work on, where we've developed comic strips and that use a superhero character to try to teach people the correct way that they should behave toward different groups and toward individuals they think are different from them. I will find a way, or try to find a way, to either download the video and share with everyone, or share with everyone, send it out as an email in the class. I'm not sure if I send out the link to it. You may have to follow the center to be able to look at it. I don't know, or be able to watch it. But it isn't required to watch. However, I wanted to kind of highlight, I guess, what I do other than talk about this. So if you're interested, take a look at it. And if you're interested in what I'm talking about, another reason to be at a university is you have experts on campus that can talk to you about different things. If you're interested in anything I'm talking about, talk to me. Come see me. If you're interested in the comics project that we work on, come to me. Let's talk. I can show you what we've worked on. We have a few comic books that have been printed so far. They're using a platform called storyboardthat.com. So it's not like kind of the traditional comic that you see, that you would see like in a Marvel comic or anything like that. But if any of that interests you, come see me. And it brings up another interesting point, that another reason, remember we talked about at the beginning of the semester, why you would be in an honors class, is we're from very different majors, probably. So real quickly, what are the represented majors in this room?
Mechanical engineering.
Mechanical engineering. Biology. What? Biology. Biology. Business management.
Accounting.
Accounting. I'm sorry? Nursing. Psychology and child development. Biochemistry. Biology. So, another reason to be in a setting like this is not only do you see me in a different light, but you interact with different people. Okay, that you probably are, or I guess have a lower likelihood of interacting with once you start down your quote-unquote chosen path. Okay, so take advantage of that. It's always good to have diversity in many different forms, and that includes ideas, diversity of ideas and diversity of expertise. And so take advantage of that while we're going through the rest of this semester. So let me check something real quick, because I just got something from Brian Collins. Let me see. Okay. So coming up with the schedule. As I said, we have next week, we have Benjamin Lancaster, who's going to be Skyping in with us. So we're going to be meeting over in the hotel, the same place we did in the conference room, the same place we met when we spoke with Kimberly. And actually, Ben emailed me this last week and said, hey, I thought you might want to let your class know. They are actually going to release the movie. They're premiering the movie on YouTube this Wednesday night at 7:30. I think they're going to do something before, so it starts at 7. I think the movie's being premiered at 7:30 Central Time. So I'm going to send out the link to the class. You have homework this week. I want you to either watch the premiere if you can. He said, I asked if the video will be up, or the movie will be up after the premiere. He said it's up for the time being, or it will be up for the time being, but no promises. Because this is also something I think still, is being worked as far as possibly being in theaters and things like that. So I will send out the link. Your homework is either try to watch the premiere on Wednesday night, or watch it before we speak with him Monday. Okay? think it'll help to give us some really good questions to ask him as well. And some of the things that he's going to talk about, like how did he come up with the idea? How did he film it? Because a lot of it, or a portion of it, was filmed in the Magic Kingdom. Like, how did he do all of that? I think it'll make a little bit more sense and give a little bit more context. So that's your homework for this Wednesday. Looking at the schedule past that, so we have we have Ben Lancaster next week. The week after that, we will be back in here to talk about our second day of Disney parks. We're starting it today. Then April 1st, the plan is, and they haven't released tickets yet, but the plan is to meet at Paradiso to see Dumbo, right? We'll have more details as those become available. It may be that week before, within that week, so you may be getting your instructions via email as far as the set time and things like that. Then that next week after that is when we're going to Skype with Brian Collins, the former Imagineer. That will be over in the hotel again, right? The week after that, we'll have class back in here to have our third day of Disney parks. That's actually the second to last class period. But I also wanted to let everybody know that Brian and I have been speaking, and he's actually going to come to campus in April. Our school hosts a research forum that we hold 3 times a semester. So we had 2 weeks ago, we had someone come talk to us about sport gambling and how kind of the moving toward legalization in the United States of sport gambling. This next week, if anyone's interested, we're going to have someone from the Community Relations Department of the Tennessee Titans here to speak to our students and to our faculty. And then in April, April 17th is when Brian Collins will be here. So he's going to talk about some of the things he's learned through being an Imagineer. And so if you're interested in seeing him on campus, I would advise you to come to that as well. It'll be on a Wednesday, and it's 9:40 in the morning. So if you don't have class and you can come in, it's in this room again. Then maybe you can talk with him afterwards, and if you have questions for him. So we are halfway through the semester. However, we are pretty jam-packed from here to the end of the semester. So I hope everybody has taken their vitamins, because the semester closes out pretty quickly, right? Any questions over your first case study, your first assignment? Okay, so that'll be turned in on eCourseWare, and then we'll talk 2 weeks from now. We'll talk about assignment number 2. All right. I know that's a lot of information as far as housekeeping is concerned. Questions, comments? Okay, so what I want to do, since we are talking about the closing, so I can keep track. Since we're talking about Disney parks, we have 3 weeks where we're going to talk about Disney parks, and so here are some pages where they post videos, really good videos of walking around the parks. If you're just interested and maybe you need a break, or you need something on in the background where something that makes you happy, here are a couple places that you can find that. So Big Fat Panda is run by a guy named John Sakari. He posts a lot of videos of different attractions. He also has a monthly show that he talks about, mostly about the Disney parks, but he talks about some other things as well. And he has some pretty good guests on his monthly show. WDW Radio, good site, and he actually holds a weekly show on Wednesdays that talks about kind of all things Disney, but he does have videos of different attractions in the parks as well, if you want to watch that. He's also, next week, I'm sorry, later in April, when we're going to talk to Brian Collins, Skype, he is the YouTube video that you're going to watch as well, because we Skyped with him last year, and talking about his journey moving from up north now, or moving from the coast to Orlando, and kind of what he's done, building a career around living in Orlando and close to the parks and the Disney. Defunct Land is kind of a fun, it's a fun place to watch videos, I think, if especially if you've been to Disney in the past, and since they've closed some attractions, the person who runs Defunct Land does different videos on closed attractions, and it's not just Disney. Right here, you can see the history of the Nickelodeon Hotel. So in Orlando, they used to have a hotel based around Nickelodeon, and he does historical videos on those. It's pretty interesting to watch. Again, if you need a break, if you need to see something a little fun. Disney park videos. Like here's the grand opening of Walt Disney World, the Disneyland stories. So these are, more production or things produced by the company that you can watch about the parks if you're interested. And then here's a good video. If we have a little bit of time, we may watch some. Talking about Disneyland USA from when it first opened. And we will start with Disneyland. And so our tour around the parks. Last year, I talked about Disneyland and I jumped around to the international parks, and then we ended up at Walt Disney World and watched videos. Most of the videos we watched were at Walt Disney World. This year, being that we're going to speak to Brian Collins in April, and before we do our last day about Disney parks, I was going to change it up a little bit. So we'll start with Disneyland. We'll talk a little bit about Walt Disney World today and next time. And then after we speak to Brian Collins, then we'll kind of have some international information and sort of an open forum for all things if you want to know about the parks that maybe I could answer, or at least give you some guidance on. So, how many people have been to Disneyland? Anyone? Okay, so Disneyland was created, essentially, the story goes, Walt Disney would take one day a week, would take his girls to Griffith Park, and that was Father-Daughter Day. They would go to Griffith Park in Los Angeles, and one time he was watching his girls ride the carousel and had the idea, hey, I wish there was something families could do together, rather than the kids doing something actively and the parents sitting and watching, kind of like they have playgrounds and things like that. And so he wanted to create this theme park where families could have fun together. And also he could promote what his company was doing. So that's why you see a lot of the attractions at any of the Disney parks are based on movies, right? How many people have been to Disney World? What's your favorite ride, or some of your favorite rides? Rock and Roller Coaster. Okay. Tower of Terror. What's Tower of Terror based on? Twilight Zone.
Well, I haven't been since I was like really little, but to my knowledge, the only one that really sticks out that I can remember was the Haunted Mansion.
Haunted Mansion. We're going to talk about that here in just a little bit. And Haunted Mansion was interesting because there was a movie made off of Haunted Mansion, right? It wasn't the other way around. Much like Pirates of the Caribbean, it was a very successful franchise made from the ride. As a matter of fact, the Pirates of the Caribbean ride in Florida, which you would have experienced, was not at Magic Kingdom when it initially opened. there wasn't going to be a Pirates of the Caribbean ride or attraction at the Magic Kingdom in Orlando because the company felt that Florida was so close to the actual Caribbean that people wouldn't really be interested in a Pirates tale. They were going to do something more along the lines of like river rafting and kind of tell that type of story. But when Magic Kingdom first opened, so many people asked about it and said they wanted the attraction that they ended up building the attraction at Magic Kingdom that we have today. Others raised your hands with favorite rides. Everest, okay. The new Pandora ride, the VR one. So, speaking of, we'll get to that in just a little bit. So, a lot of what you're telling me, a lot of our favorite rides are based off of movies. My favorite ride, I think, of all time is probably Peter Pan's Flight of Peter Pan. I love that ride. It was one of the first ones I ever went on, and it blew my mind and continues to just thoroughly impress me every time I get on it. The fact that it looks like you're flying over London and their use of forced perspective and everything like that is just fabulous. If you have not been on Flight of Peter Pan, go. And go early. Because when the park opens, that line fills up so quick. Literally, if you are at rope drop, which is their kind of opening ceremony, if you are at rope drop and you walk as fast as you can to Peter Pan back to Fantasyland, there may be a 45-minute wait already. I mean, people just flock to that one as soon as it opens. That, Space Mountain, the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. So, but you know that these rides and attractions in this park was used to promote what the company was doing. When Disneyland was built, the company would not allow Walt to use money from the studio for this new endeavor. So that's why we discussed he formed another company called WED Enterprises after Walter Elias Disney, his initials. WED Enterprises afterwards became Walt Disney Imagineering, which is what we have now. So he had this different company that could just germinate ideas and allow ideas to grow. That company is largely responsible for the content that was in Disneyland when it opened. Now, when Disneyland opened, and if you're interested, you can watch on YouTube the official opening, the television opening for Disneyland. It had a lot of problems. For example, there was a plumber strike, so there weren't enough water fountains when Disneyland opened. The asphalt hadn't completely dried in some areas, so women walking in high heels could step out of their high heels because their high heels would actually get stuck in the asphalt. Portions of Fantasyland, much of Tomorrowland wasn't completed. But it still was a very popular attraction. And on top of all that, opening day, they had planned on a family, friend, and press event. Somebody printed 15,000 counterfeit tickets. So the place was jam-packed for the television premiere. The television show is live, so you should watch it sometime. It's very interesting. It's complete with missed cues and things like that. It was a very, very popular attraction. And ultimately has led to, if you've ever been to Anaheim, kind of what Anaheim represents now, where it is they have the Anaheim Ducks, they have an NHL team, they have a baseball team in Anaheim now. Everything kind of came attracted to Disneyland. Now, who said the Haunted Mansion? Okay, so the Haunted Mansion, I know you're talking about the one at Magic Kingdom and Walt Disney World, but the one at the Magic Kingdom in Disneyland was not open when the park was open. And if you ever get into historical videos, there's great videos with Walt Disney himself talking about upcoming plans such as Pirates of the Caribbean, the Tiki Room, and talking about the Haunted Mansion. They would produce these 30-minute shows, sometimes an hour-long show for television that allowed the company to highlight what was coming up. It highlighted the park, and then also what would be happening or what they were imagining for the park. Haunted Mansion was one of those. The company got the idea, and Walt Disney got the idea because that's actually a large part of how he raised money for Disneyland itself. CBS bought into Disneyland, the attraction, or the theme park, because he created a Disneyland television show for CBS. And it would run weekly. It allowed them to reuse some of the content they had as a company, some of the animation they had as a company, short segments, live action segments, but also allowed them to show progress for this new park. And so when the new park opened, you know, everyone was interested in going to this park. So getting back to Haunted Mansion. How many people have been on the Haunted Mansion in the Magic Kingdom? You know the stretching room? What's the stretching room? Yeah, the wall. You remember there's the portraits, and you're standing there, and the walls stretch up to show people either in precarious or devious situations, right? At Disneyland, the stretching room is actually an elevator. So when Disneyland was built, the same thing at Walt Disney World, there's a berm around the theme park. A berm exists to help keep people's attention in the park and away from what's going on outside of the park. Okay, so to keep them in this kind of set of this Fantasyland set for the day. So a berm was built. Since Haunted Mansion wasn't open when the theme park opened, they wanted to build this attraction. However, there wasn't enough room in the berm. So they had to build the attraction building on the other side of the berm. How do you get people from inside the berm to the other side of the berm without knowing, or without walking outside and actually walking over the physical berm? They put people in an elevator. So that was the original, or that is the stretching room in Disneyland. Now, at Magic Kingdom in Orlando, it isn't an elevator, it's an extra stretching room because everything is on the same level, right? They didn't have the same problem. But they didn't have the problem of space that they did at Disneyland. Other, just kind of general questions about Disneyland anyone has? So Disneyland was a one-gate attraction for a long time. Basically meant there was one park. How many parks are at the Disneyland Resort now? There's Disney, there's the Magic Kingdom, then there's also California Adventure. When California Adventure first opened, it had long been talked about they needed a second gate at the Disneyland Resort, or it was just Disneyland at that time. They needed a second gate in Anaheim. And various ideas had been pitched as to were they going to do an Epcot West, much like the Epcot that's in Orlando. And they ultimately came up with what they called California Adventure. Now, California Adventure was vastly different when it opened than how it is today. It was a theme park all about the state of California and the different regions of California. The problem was they had difficulty getting people into the park. So in the 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s is when they started to make their changes and kind of refurbished what you know as California Adventure now. And one of the first kind of new attractions at California Adventure was Cars Land. So our Cars fans here, Radiator Springs exists at Disney California Adventure. You can walk into Radiator Springs, you can walk up to the Cozy Cone Motel, Flo's V8 Diner. There are rides based around Luigi's Tire Shop. There's a ride based around Mater's Junkyard. And there's a ride, Radiator Springs Racers, which we'll watch here in just a minute. Other things that have happened at California Adventure, they have Pixar Pier now. So all things Pixar, they refurbished or rethemed one of their roller coasters that was called California Screaming. Now it's the Incredicoaster, so it's based around the Incredibles. They had animatronics to it and different theming to that. They're opening up. That's where Toy Story Mania is. So if anybody's been on Toy Story Mania in Orlando at Hollywood Studios, that's where it is in California Adventure. And they're also planning. They're building a carousel, I believe, that's based around Jesse's creatures. So from the Toy Story franchise as well. So we'll watch this video of Radiator Springs Racers. And if you have time and you need a break, type in People of Disneyland on YouTube. And you can kind of see what Disneyland looked like. Here's kind of a The Jungle Cruise. How many people like the Jungle Cruise? Okay, the original idea for the Jungle Cruise, Walt Disney wanted live animals in the Jungle Cruise. However, when it was explained to him, live animals are on their own schedule. People may not be able to see the live animals. He went to audio animatronics. Okay? How many people have been on the African safari and Kilimanjaro safaris at Animal Kingdom? Anyone been on that? So that was kind of the manifestation of the original idea for the Jungle Cruise. Okay? The ride, the Jungle Cruise, is based on their live, what do they call it? Living Nature television series. So the company made documentaries and shows about different nature-related activities and different nature-related areas. How many people have ever seen one of the Disney nature movies now? They're coming out with one on Earth Day about penguins. Anybody ever seen any of those? It's kind of an iteration of what they did in the past and why the Jungle Cruise ride exists. So let's watch Radiator Springs Racers, give you an idea, a little bit of an idea of Cars Land and also the ride itself. Give you a little bit of glimpse of what the lines look like. All right, here's the actual ride itself. And I'll talk over it a little bit, if you don't mind. Can everyone see this? This is a dark ride, half dark ride, half outside. If you've ever been to Epcot and you've been on Test Track, similar technology used for Test Track is used for this ride. And this is one of the most advanced use of audio animatronics that they have. Very, very impressive. This is one I can't wait to take. So I want you to pay attention to their eyes. You see how their eyes look like they're screens and they're projections? So when Disneyland first opened and Disney World first opened, the use of audio animatronics, by today's standard, kind of looked like a waxing symbol. And actually, if you've ever been on the aerial ride at Magic Kingdom in Orlando, a lot of people talked about, one, they retold the story of the movie, which people wish they would have told a different story, and the use of audio animatronics, whereas the face of Ariel and the face of Eric was very much like what you would see in a wax museum. So what they started doing is they have, with people's faces, they're actually flat surfaces or rounded surfaces where they're projecting the pictures on those faces. So they just be more interactive. Okay? Same thing with the eyes here to make them more interactive with the riders. So at this point, part of the riders go to this side where you get your car painted. Other riders will go to the other side where you get new tires from Guido and Luigi. There you go. And if you want extra added benefit, lean back in your seats when we start to go. And you can move with us.
Would you say like the cars are made out of?
What are they made out of?
Yeah.
I don't know what the cars are made. The faces.
Like the protection. Is it like real or is it like what is it?
So in a dark ride, they can create flat surfaces and they're actually projecting the faces on those.
Okay.
So for example, the Haunted Mansion, the singing heads, those are one of the first times they used projections on boards. So one of the most advanced uses of the technology that they have. See, his mouth as well. It's the same concept, where it's projection, so it looks like his mouth can be moved up. I know, it looks like an awesome ride, doesn't it?
And it looked like the characters, like the cars. Like a movie.
I know, can you imagine riding through and actually interacting with those characters? It's amazing, right? Some of the things that they're doing, and I don't know if you all saw, but Disney had their stockholder meeting this last week. So they actually announced when the Star Wars land was opening in Disneyland and Walt Disney World. It's opening at the end of April, and I believe it's the end of April. In Disneyland, it's opening August 29th in Orlando, so it's actually ahead of schedule. They are expecting very large crowds for the Galaxy's Edge, the Star Wars land. So they're actually opening one attraction at a time. There's two e-ticket, which they call them e-ticket attractions because they're the most exciting. So when Disneyland first opened and when the Magic Kingdom first opened, it actually was free to get in, or you paid a low price to get in to the park, and then you bought tickets for each ride. So you would buy them to help control crowds. They created a booklet of ABC tickets, and A was kind of the least crowded rides, B would be moderately crowded, C would be the most exciting or the most crowded rides. You would receive a certain number of tickets for each one of those types of rides. Then they went on to add a D ticket and now an E ticket. And so obviously they don't have the ticket system anymore, but they still refer to things as e-ticket attractions. So for instance, in Galaxy's Edge, they have one ride where you are going to fly the Millennium Falcon. Okay, that one will be open when the land's open. The other ride is when you are in a battle with the Empire. That one won't be open for a period of time to try to control the different crowds that they're expecting for those lands. And when we talk about immersion, so this was one of the early examples, because this was open 2009, I believe, is when they opened this land. Early example of immersion into kind of a movie land, right? Walking through Radiator Springs. How many people have been to Pandora? Okay, another immersion into, and I haven't been yet. I've heard it's absolutely amazing. At some of the international parks, they're opening Marvel lands. So one of the international parks are actually going to have a Spider-Man attraction, Iron Man attraction. They have Iron Man attractions at some of the international parks now. The reason you don't see a lot of Marvel and Orlando is the contractual obligations that Marvel Comics, the company Marvel Comics, made a long time ago with some of their movies and some of the theme park attractions. So for instance, if you will see Spider-Man at Universal Studios in Orlando. They have the contract to be able to use his theme park rides. Until they make some type of adjustment or improvement to the ride, then Disney will get those rights. If not, it'll be a certain amount of time before it runs out. But when you talk about immersion, this new Star Wars land is supposed to be unbelievable. To the point where I've read with your phones, you're going to do certain things with your phones that you're not doing now in the parks. I don't know if that's lightsabers or what it is. It is going to be truly interactive. Where, for instance, if you are on Smuggler's Run, which is the Millennium Falcon ride, and you're going to have a mission, and you don't complete that mission to satisfaction, you are going to be treated differently in Galaxy's Edge than you would if you completed that mission to satisfaction. So I don't know if that means you walk into a restaurant and you're treated poorly, or an alien creature's rude to you. But it is going to be a truly immersive land. They're building a hotel with it that people are, when you stay at this hotel, and this won't be open for a few years now, when you're staying at this hotel, you're going to have missions. And you're going to have access from that hotel to Star Wars land. So it's going to be built adjoining to that land, have its own private interests into the parks. So one thing to kind of move us toward talking about Walt Disney World next time, after Disneyland opened, the company and Walt Disney started getting a lot of questions over, were they going to open a second park? Are they going to open a second park on the East Coast? There were a lot of ideas thrown around about opening a park or an entertainment center in St. Louis, Missouri, close to his hometown, close to what he claims of his hometown was Marceline, Missouri. There were also talks of opening a park outside of Virginia, and call it Disney's America. They changed the name because people felt like the company was taking ownership over the country. And long after his death, the company talked about, was close to breaking ground on opening Disney's America outside of Virginia. But during his life, they also talked about opening a park in New York, which is why the 1964-65 World's Fair in New York City was paramount in having the company work on technology and work on different rides. So at the Magic Kingdom, have you ever been in Carousel of Progress? It's the animatronic show that you actually sit, you watch a stage show, and then You rotate, the crowd rotates around the stage. Has anybody ever been to that? That was created for the World's Fair. So next time you go to that show. It is a fantastic show, especially if you know some of the history of it. For one thing, the stage stays the same. It is in one place. The crowd rotates around. Why did they do that? To help with crowd size, to make sure that the most number of people can get in. So there are 5 simultaneous shows going on. But that was developed for the New York World's Fair. It's a Small World was developed for the New York's World Fair as part of PepsiCo and UNESCO, their pavilion. It's a Small World was actually broken down and taken to Disneyland after the World's Fair, same as Carousel of Progress that was taken to Disneyland, then moved from Disneyland to what we have in the Magic Kingdom now. And how many people have ever been in the Hall of Presidents at Magic Kingdom? Okay, so the Hall of Presidents comes from Tales from Mr. Lincoln. And Walt Disney was, one, very, very interested always in Abraham Lincoln and the history of Abraham Lincoln. And he also wanted to work on audio animatronics and, in a way, recreate life. So the state of Illinois Pavilion, they built a working Abraham Lincoln for that pavilion. So he would tell stories in the pavilion. That is now in Disneyland. Disneyland does not have a Hall of Presidents like we do, like Orlando has. But they have this show that came from the 1964-65 New York World's Fair. One of the catalysts for Walt Disney to open Walt Disney World in Orlando was the idea of Epcot. Okay? If you want history on opening, or on negotiating, actually finding the land, there's a really good book that we have, Project Future, that's listed on the syllabus and on the e-coursework shelf. But this idea of Epcot was really what drove Walt Disney up to his death as far as his interest in building in Florida. And he knew he had to build a park that people would be kind of attracted to first. So that was going to be the first stage. So that's why we have Magic Kingdom in Orlando. But this idea of Epcot was originally called the Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. And it wasn't going to be a theme park. It was going to be a working city where people live. Much of the technology that you see around the parks was kind of born from this idea of what Epcot would represent. For instance, the People Mover in Magic Kingdom. The monorail was seen as something that was kind of a catalyst for Epcot. So, between now and the next time we talk about Disney parks, which remember will be 2 weeks. Next week we're meeting in the Holiday Inn to talk to Ben Lancaster. Look up a little history on Epcot. It's very, very interesting. The original intent and then what it became as the theme park that we know today. Any questions? All right, remember, Wednesday night, The Further Adventures of Walt's Frozen Head is premiering. Starts at 7. I believe the movie starts at 7:30. I'll send out the link to it. If you can, watch the premiere. If not, watch it before we meet with him on Monday to give you some insight and maybe foster some questions, okay? Have a good rest of the week. Thank you very much.